When I collected my daughter-in-law's coat from Mr. Wallace's dry cleaning establishment, the owner, a gentleman I'd known for many years, drew me aside into a secluded corner. "Mrs. Sterling," he whispered urgently, pressing a small plastic bag into my palm, "you must remove those children from the city immediately. Today." His voice trembled with unmistakable fear. In that moment, I had absolutely no conception that I was about to uncover a horrifying conspiracy that would shatter our family's foundation forever. The oppressive heat of that December afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina, pressed against my skin as I made my way down the main thoroughfare. Heavy grocery bags weighed down my arms, and I could feel perspiration trickling down my spine. Mr. Wallace's establishment appeared on the corner, its weathered sign swaying gently in the faint breeze that offered no relief from the humidity. I retrieved the crumpled dry cleaning ticket from my purse, the one Tanisha, my daughter-in-law, had handed me that morning. "Mama Doris, would you mind terribly picking up my beige coat from the cleaners?" she'd asked, flashing that hurried smile of hers while adjusting her hair in the living room mirror. "I have back-to-back meetings all day." I'd agreed without hesitation. After all, it was simply another small favor for my son's wife. The bell mounted above the dry cleaner's entrance chimed melodiously as I stepped inside. The mingled scents of fabric softener and hot steam immediately filled my nostrils. Mr. Wallace stood behind the counter, a man in his 70s with spectacles perched precariously on the bridge of his nose and hands marked by decades of honest labor. I extended the slip toward him. "Ah, Mrs. Sterling," he acknowledged quietly, glancing at the ticket. "Please give me just a moment." While I waited, my eyes drifted toward the wall clock. It was already past 5 o'clock. I needed to return home soon to prepare dinner for my grandchildren, Isaiah and Ava, aged 7 and 5 respectively. My son Marcus worked late hours, and Tanisha always seemed to have commitments whose exact nature remained somewhat unclear to me. Mr. Wallace emerged from the back with the coat, neatly encased in transparent plastic wrapping. However, instead of handing it to me directly, he glanced around nervously, ensuring we were alone. His weathered face had taken on a troubled expression. "Mrs. Sterling," he spoke in barely more than a whisper, "there's something I must show you." Before I could formulate a response, he grasped my arm with his thin, bony hand and guided me behind a curtain that separated the shop's front area from the laundry facilities. The rhythmic hum of the industrial washers effectively muffled our conversation. "I discovered this while checking the pockets, as I always do," he explained, producing a small plastic bag from a nearby drawer. My heart immediately began racing when I glimpsed the contents. Inside was a photograph of my grandchildren playing innocently in our backyard. What caused my blood to turn cold, however, were the crude red circles drawn around their small faces, harsh, angry marks that seemed to scream of malicious intent. Beside the photograph lay a bank transfer receipt documenting a sum so astronomical it made my eyes widen in disbelief. The amount was in the millions. "When I saw this, I couldn't believe my own eyes," Mr. Wallace continued, his voice quavering with emotion. "I've known you and your family for many years, Mrs. Sterling. I simply couldn't hand back the coat as if nothing were amiss." I accepted the plastic bag with trembling hands, nearly dropping it as fear gripped me. "Mrs. Sterling, you must take those children far away from this city," he insisted, his eyes radiating genuine terror. "I'm deadly serious. This type of marking is exceedingly dangerous. I've heard stories, terrible stories." "What exactly does it signify?" I managed to ask, my voice barely functioning. "I cannot say with absolute certainty," he admitted, "but those red circles around their faces, I've seen similar markings mentioned in news reports. They're associated with human trafficking operations." The air in the small room became suffocating. Human trafficking. My precious grandchildren. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the floor felt unsteady beneath my feet. "Don't waste a single moment," he urged with desperate intensity. "Take those little ones and leave the city before sunrise. Don't tell anyone, not even your son. We cannot know who might be involved in this. I departed the dry cleaning establishment in a state of profound shock. The grocery bags that had felt heavy before now seemed to weigh a ton. Tanisha's coat lay draped over my arm, and the plastic bag burned in my pocket like hot coals. The street appeared unchanged, cars passing by, people returning home from their workdays, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. Yet my entire world had just collapsed. I arrived home with my heart hammering violently against my ribcage. Isaiah and Ava were settled in the living room, absorbed in their cartoons. The moment they spotted me, they rushed over for hugs. "Grandma, did you remember to bring ice cream?" Ava inquired, her large, innocent eyes gazing up at me expectantly. I looked down at those small, trusting faces, the very same faces that someone had circled with red marker. Summoning every ounce of strength I possessed, I forced a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. Let's put away the groceries first, and then you may have your treat." My cell phone chimed with an incoming text. It was from Tanisha, running late. Emergency meeting at the office. Kisses. I stared at the message, then back at the photograph concealed in the plastic bag. This was the woman I'd treated like my own daughter for 7 years. The woman who professed to love my son. The woman who had given birth to these two innocent souls. How could she possibly be involved in something so utterly monstrous? While I prepared dinner, spaghetti with meatballs, my mind raced frantically through possible scenarios and solutions. I didn't own a car, and my savings were modest at best. Where could I possibly take 2 young children in the middle of the night? Who would believe my story? If I confided in Marcus, he would immediately confront Tanisha. And what if she truly was entangled with dangerous criminals? I served dinner while maintaining a facade of normalcy, though internally every nerve in my body screamed for us to flee. "Grandma, why are your hands shaking?" Isaiah asked, observing me carefully as I poured their juice. "I'm simply tired, darling," I replied, my voice somehow remaining steady. After dinner, while the children were occupied with their bath, I telephoned my childhood friend Celeste, who had relocated to Atlanta, Georgia several years prior. "I desperately need your assistance," I said, struggling to keep my voice from breaking. "It's an emergency. May I stay at your home for a few days with my grandchildren?" Celeste didn't pepper me with questions. She simply said yes. A friendship spanning 5 decades affords that privilege, trust without interrogation. I then called a taxi service, requesting a pickup at 4 o'clock in the morning. At midnight, with the children sleeping peacefully, I began packing a small suitcase, some clothing, toiletries, Isaiah's allergy medication, Ava's beloved doll. My brain felt numb, operating purely on autopilot. I grabbed my phone and photographed the plastic bag's contents. It was the only evidence I possessed in case something went terribly wrong. Marcus called around 1 o'clock in the morning. "Mama, I'm sleeping at the office tonight. We have a major client presentation tomorrow morning. How are the kids doing?" I bit my lip hard to prevent the tears from flowing. My son, always working, always trusting that Tanisha and I would handle everything, completely oblivious to the danger circling his children. "They're perfectly fine, son. Sound asleep. Has Tanisha arrived home yet?" "No. She sent a message saying she'd be working late." There was a pregnant pause on the other end of the line. "Again," he said, and I could detect the frustration creeping into his voice. These meetings of hers are becoming increasingly frequent. After disconnecting the call, I sat on the edge of my bed, watching my grandchildren sleep. In the darkness, I could only make out the silhouettes of their small bodies beneath the covers, so vulnerable, so trusting that the adults in their lives would protect them from harm. 15 minutes before 4 o'clock, I gently roused them from sleep. "We're embarking on a surprise adventure, my darlings," I whispered softly, helping them into coats over their pajamas. "Right now, Grandma?" Isaiah asked groggily, rubbing his eyes. "It's still nighttime." "Yes, sweetheart. It's a special adventure. We're going to visit Auntie Celeste in Atlanta. What about Mommy? Ava inquired, her voice thick with sleep. She knows we're going. She'll join us there later. Another lie. How many more would I be forced to tell? The taxi arrived precisely on schedule. I secured the children in the back seat with their seatbelts and placed our suitcase in the trunk. Just as we were preparing to depart, I noticed the headlights of Tanisha's vehicle turning onto our street. Please drive quickly, I instructed the driver urgently. As the taxi accelerated down the dark street, I glanced back through the rear window. Tanisha's car was pulling up directly in front of our house. She would enter, discover the house empty, and then, what would she do? Contact the police? Call Marcus? Or reach out to her mysterious accomplices? The drive to Atlanta seemed interminable. Ava eventually fell back asleep in my lap, but Isaiah remained awake, watching the highway lights and passing trucks through the window with unusual attentiveness. "Grandma," he said quietly after a long silence, "we're running away, aren't we?" I looked at him with surprise. Children are far more perceptive than we often give them credit for. "What makes you say that, sweetheart?" "Because you're frightened. I can see it in your eyes." I pulled him closer against me. "We're simply going to visit Auntie Celeste. It will be enjoyable. You'll see." But as the taxi cut through the pre-dawn darkness, carrying the 3 remaining members of my family I could still trust, I knew we truly were running, fleeing from a betrayal so profound I could scarcely comprehend it, racing to protect what was most precious. And it had all begun with a coat at the dry cleaner's. We arrived at Celeste's residence just as the sun was beginning to paint the sky with streaks of pink and gold. She was waiting on the front porch, an old bathrobe thrown over her nightgown, her gray hair disheveled. As the taxi pulled away, she embraced me without uttering a single word, simply squeezing my shoulders with firm reassurance, the kind of embrace that communicates, "I'm here for you, no matter what." Her house was modest but inviting, an older 2-story home with a backyard and a kitchen that emanated the comforting aromas of fresh coffee and homemade bread. She guided the drowsy children to the guest room while I collapsed into a kitchen chair, utterly exhausted. "Now tell me exactly what happened," Celeste said firmly, setting a mug of strong, steaming coffee before me. "You wouldn't flee in the middle of the night without an exceptionally good reason." With trembling hands, I retrieved my phone and showed her the photograph I'd taken of the plastic bag's contents. Her eyes widened dramatically. "My God, Doris, that's—" "Yes," I interrupted, unable to hear her say it aloud. "I discovered it in Tanisha's coat. The dry cleaner showed it to me. He insisted I had to protect the children immediately." Celeste sank heavily into the chair across from me. "Do you genuinely believe Tanisha is involved? Perhaps someone placed it in her coat without her knowledge." I shook my head emphatically. "There's a bank transfer for millions of dollars, Celeste. And she's been behaving strangely for months. Constant unexplained trips, secretive phone calls, always with vague excuses about business meetings." My cell phone vibrated urgently against the table. It was Marcus. I looked at Celeste in panic. "Answer it," she advised. "Act completely normal. Don't reveal where you are." I inhaled deeply and pressed accept. "Mama!" Marcus's voice was laden with desperation and confusion. "Where are you? I came home and no one is here. Tanisha says you've disappeared with the children." "Marcus, please calm down," I said, fighting to maintain a steady voice. "The children are perfectly safe. We're all safe." "Safe? What are you talking about?" "Tanisha is absolutely frantic. She's already contacted the police." My heart plummeted. The police. Of course she would involve the authorities immediately. A grandmother absconding with her grandchildren, the perfect narrative to paint me as the villain. "Marcus, please listen to me carefully. I've discovered something Something absolutely terrible. I cannot explain it over the phone. Your communications may be monitored. Mama, you're terrifying me. What kind of story is this? Tanisha believes you may have had some sort of mental episode. The implication was crystal clear. My daughter-in-law was suggesting I'd suffered a psychological breakdown. Rage surged through my chest like fire. Son, I am perfectly lucid and rational. I need you to meet me, alone, without Tanisha's knowledge. This concerns the children. It's extremely serious. There was an extended silence. Where are you? He finally asked, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I cannot say over the phone. I'm going to text you the address of a public location where we can meet. Come alone. Marcus. Your children's lives depend upon it. I disconnected the call, my entire body trembling. Celeste reached across and squeezed my hand firmly. Do you genuinely believe the phones are being monitored? She asked with concern. I don't know for certain, but I cannot afford to take that risk, not if Tanisha is truly involved with dangerous criminals. Isaiah appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Grandma, I'm hungry. I forced myself to smile warmly. We're going to prepare the most delicious pancake breakfast, sweetheart. While Celeste mixed batter and heated the griddle for the children, I sent Marcus a text message, arranging to meet at the food court in Lenox Square Mall in Atlanta at 2 o'clock that afternoon. The remainder of the morning passed in a surreal blur. I attempted to act naturally around the children, who were delighted by Celeste's spacious backyard and the fat, friendly cat that resided there. However, every unexpected noise caused me to startle. Every vehicle that drove past the house sent me rushing to the window. At 1:30 in the afternoon, I departed, leaving the children safely in Celeste's care, and took a bus to the mall. I selected a strategic position in the food court where I maintained clear sight lines to all entrances. I ordered coffee that I couldn't bring myself to drink. My stomach was twisted into an impossibly tight knot. I observed Marcus arrive 15 minutes before our agreed meeting time. He appeared to have aged a decade since I'd last seen him, merely 2 days prior. Deep shadows circled his eyes, his beard was unkempt, and his shoulders sagged beneath the crushing weight of worry. He spotted me immediately and walked rapidly in my direction. I stood to embrace him, but instead he gripped my arms tightly, almost painfully. Mama, what have you done? Where are my children? They're safe, I replied, keeping my voice deliberately low. Please, sit down. I must show you something. He sat reluctantly, his body tense with barely contained emotion. I retrieved my phone and displayed the photograph I had taken. I discovered this concealed in Tanisha's coat. The dry cleaner entrusted it to me yesterday. Marcus took my phone, staring intently at the image. I watched his facial expression transform from anger to confusion, then to something I couldn't quite identify. What are those circles? He asked, his voice barely audible. According to Mr. Wallace, it's a marking utilized by human traffickers. Marcus, I believe Tanisha is planning to sell the children. He shook his head vehemently, as if the physical motion could dispel the horrifying suggestion. No, absolutely not. That's completely absurd. There must be some reasonable explanation. Tanisha would never. She loves her children. Examine the transfer amount, I insisted, pointing to the screen. Millions of dollars. And how long has she been behaving strangely? Late-night meetings, unexplained business trips, constantly on her phone with people you've never met. I observed doubt beginning to take root in his eyes. Marcus worked such long hours. He trusted so implicitly that he'd never questioned his wife's increasingly frequent absences. Even if what you're suggesting were true, he stammered, why did you run? Why didn't you come to me first? Mr. Wallace explicitly warned me not to trust anyone. We don't know who else might be involved, Marcus. What if Tanisha is part of a larger criminal network? Marcus dragged his hands down his face, struggling to process the information. "I need to see my children," he finally declared. "I need to verify they're truly all right." "They are," I assured him. "But before I take you to them, we must decide on a course of action. If you confront Tanisha directly, she'll deny everything. She might even manipulate you into believing I'm delusional. We need concrete proof." "What proof?" he demanded, gesturing at the phone. "This could be anything. It could have been planted. It could be a misunderstanding." I had anticipated this resistance. No one wants to accept that the person they chose to build a life with is capable of such profound betrayal. "Marcus, have you never observed anything suspicious? Have you truly never noticed anything unusual?" He remained silent for an extended moment, internal conflict evident on his face. "There's a safe," he finally admitted quietly, "in our bedroom closet. Tanisha claimed it was for storing valuable jewelry, but I've never had the combination. And recently, I've noticed substantial sums being transferred from our joint bank account." My pulse quickened. "We need to examine what's inside that safe." "Mama, that would be invading her privacy. We can't simply. We are discussing the safety of your children." I interrupted more harshly than intended. "If I'm mistaken, I'll apologize to Tanisha on my hands and knees. But what if I'm correct? Could you live with yourself knowing you had an opportunity to save them and did nothing?" I witnessed the internal struggle reflected in his eyes, love for his wife warring against concern for his children. Finally, he nodded with grim determination. "Tanisha is at the police station currently, providing a statement about the alleged kidnapping. The house is empty. Then we go now." We departed the mall and hailed a taxi back to Charlotte. Throughout the entire journey, we remained silent. Marcus stared out the window, lost in troubled thoughts. I prayed silently, prayed that I was wrong, that there existed an innocent explanation for everything. Yet deep in my soul, I knew those red circles represented a death sentence for my grandchildren, and I would do absolutely anything to save them. The taxi deposited us 2 blocks from Marcus's house as a precautionary measure. We walked quickly through the familiar streets, which now seemed laden with invisible threats. The 2-story house where my son had constructed his family appeared before us, silent and ominous as a tomb. Marcus opened the front door with trembling hands. The interior was exactly as I had left it the previous night. Isaiah's toys remained scattered across the carpet. Ava's coloring books lay open on the coffee table. There was an eerie stillness permeating the space, as if the house itself knew we were about to expose its darkest secrets. "The safe is located in our bedroom closet," Marcus said, ascending the stairs. I followed him into the master bedroom. The king-size bed was disheveled, likely from Tanisha's distress upon discovering our disappearance. The walk-in closet was spacious, with Tanisha's expensive wardrobe meticulously organized on one side and Marcus's modest suits hanging on the other. At the rear, concealed behind a row of designer shoes, was a wall-mounted safe. "You never attempted to open it?" I asked incredulously. Marcus shook his head. "Tanisha was always intensely private about certain matters. I respected that boundary." I studied the safe, the digital keypad blinking expectantly, awaiting the combination. "Do we have any idea what the code might be?" Marcus sighed thoughtfully. "She utilizes the same password for nearly everything. Our wedding date." He entered 6 digits. The safe remained locked. "Perhaps the children's birthdays," he suggested. Several more unsuccessful attempts followed. I scanned the room for potential clues. On Tanisha's dresser sat a framed photograph of her with a man who was decidedly not Marcus. They were smiling intimately, standing far too close to be merely professional colleagues. "Who is this?" I asked, bringing him the photograph. Marcus frowned deeply. "Tyrone. He's a colleague of hers." "Why?" I turned the frame over. A date was handwritten on the backing paper, 128. Try this date, I suggested urgently, handing the photograph to Marcus. His eyes widened as he registered the notation. With hesitant fingers, he entered the digits. 128. A metallic click echoed through the closet. The safe door swung open. Inside were multiple stacks of currency in various denominations, passports, not only for Tanisha but also for Isaiah and Ava bearing completely false identities. An envelope contained 3 airline tickets for international travel, exclusively for Tanisha and the children. Marcus's name appeared nowhere. But what caused my blood to freeze was a manila folder. Marcus opened it with shaking hands, revealing additional photographs of Isaiah and Ava. Every single image bore those sinister red circles around their innocent faces. Adjacent to the photographs was a document resembling a contract, with astronomical monetary values and terms that turned my stomach. "Oh God," Marcus whispered, collapsing to his knees. She was going to sell them. I placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, unable to find adequate words. How does one console a son who has just discovered that the mother of his children planned to sell them like commodities? Suddenly, we heard a vehicle pulling up outside the house. We rushed to the bedroom window. It was Tanisha exiting an unfamiliar car. Beside her stood a tall man dressed in a dark suit. "It's him," Marcus said, his voice strangled with emotion. "Tyrone." Working rapidly, Marcus photographed the safe's contents with his phone. We gathered several of the most incriminating documents and closed the safe, attempting to leave everything as we'd found it. "We need to exit through the back," I whispered urgently. We descended the stairs as silently as possible. Through the kitchen window, I observed Tanisha and Tyrone entering through the front door. Their voices were tense, argumentative. "We must locate them immediately," Tanisha was insisting. "The transfer has already been completed. If we fail to deliver the children within 2 days, we're as good as dead." "Calm yourself," Tyrone responded. "We'll find them. Your mother-in-law couldn't have gone far with 2 young children." Marcus gripped my arm so tightly I nearly cried out in pain. His face had gone deathly pale, his lips trembling uncontrollably. For the first time in his entire life, I witnessed my son utterly devastated. We slipped silently out the back door, concealed by the tall hedge bordering the property. We walked as quickly as we dared until we reached a busy commercial avenue where we hailed another taxi heading back toward Atlanta. During the journey, Marcus remained silent, repeatedly viewing the photographs on his phone as if still unable to accept their reality. Finally, he spoke. "We must go to the police immediately. We cannot simply walk into any precinct," I argued. "If Tanisha is part of a larger criminal organization, we don't know who else might be compromised. We need someone we can absolutely trust." Marcus nodded, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "I have a college friend who's a detective in Atlanta, Detective Henderson. I'll contact him." The telephone conversation was brief. Marcus avoided specific details, only stating it was a family emergency requiring Detective Henderson's immediate assistance. We arrived in Atlanta 2 hours later. Rather than returning directly to Celeste's house, we proceeded straight to a small diner in the downtown area. Detective Henderson was already waiting, a solidly built man with a graying beard and sharp, intelligent eyes. "Marcus," he said warmly, embracing my son. "Thank you for coming," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. We settled into a secluded booth. Marcus displayed the photographs of the safe's contents and recounted the entire horrifying story. Detective Henderson listened with intense concentration, his expression hardening with each revelation. "Those red circles," he finally said gravely, "are a recognized marking of an international human trafficking ring. We've been investigating this organization for years, but they're exceptionally careful. We rarely obtain concrete evidence." "What happens now?" I asked, feeling ice forming in my stomach. Now we must proceed with extreme caution, Detective Henderson replied seriously. If what you're telling me is accurate, Tanisha and this Tyrone individual are merely low-level operatives in a much larger criminal enterprise. We need to construct a sting operation to apprehend them and hopefully trace the network to its leadership. And the children? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. They must remain hidden until we resolve this situation. They absolutely cannot return home or stay anywhere obvious. I informed Detective Henderson about Celeste, and he agreed that temporarily it was the safest location for Isaiah and Ava. However, he suggested an additional security measure. I'm going to assign an undercover officer to maintain surveillance near the house, just as insurance. We departed the diner with a concrete plan. Detective Henderson would activate a small, trusted investigative team to examine Tanisha and Tyrone discreetly. Marcus would remain with me and the children at Celeste's residence. And I would need to continue being strong for all of us. When we arrived at Celeste's house, Isaiah and Ava immediately rushed to embrace their father. Witnessing them together, Marcus clutching his children desperately, as if terrified they might vanish, shattered my heart into pieces. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Ava asked innocently, touching her father's tear-stained face with her small hand. "It's because I'm so incredibly happy to see you both," he replied, forcing a smile through his tears. That night, after the children finally fell asleep, Marcus, Celeste, and I gathered in the kitchen. The full weight of our situation settled heavily upon us. "How could I have failed to see it?" Marcus murmured, his hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. All the warning signs were there. The sudden trips, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained money. How could I have been so blind? "You loved her," I replied simply. "Love sometimes blinds us to harsh truths." Celeste began heating water for fresh tea. "The important thing is that you discovered the truth in time," she said firmly. "Now you need to be strong for your children." Marcus nodded, but I observed a pain in his eyes so profound I doubted it would ever fully heal. It wasn't merely Tanisha's betrayal, it was the unimaginable horror of knowing the mother of his children had been willing to sell them. That night, lying on the makeshift bed in Celeste's living room, I couldn't sleep. I mentally replayed countless moments with Tanisha throughout the years. Family dinners, the children's birthday celebrations, intimate confidences we'd shared. Had everything been an elaborate deception? Or had she changed at some point, seduced by promises of wealth and a different life? And how would we eventually explain this to the children when they were older? How does one tell Isaiah and Ava that their mother had betrayed them in the most horrific way imaginable? Through the window, I noticed the subtle glow of a patrol car parked discreetly on the corner, the officer Detective Henderson had assigned to protect us. I felt a surge of gratitude amid the desperation. At least we were no longer alone in this battle. I finally succumbed to exhaustion, only to be awakened by my cell phone ringing insistently. It was an unknown number. With my heart pounding, I answered. "Hello," I whispered, attempting not to wake the others. "Doris." Tanisha's voice was cold, controlled, utterly devoid of emotion. I froze, unable to formulate a response. How had she obtained my number? I had changed the SIM card. "It's pointless to pretend," she continued icily. "I know you have my children." "What kind of deal?" I asked, moving silently toward the front porch to avoid being overheard. "Bring me the children tomorrow. No police involvement, no Marcus, just you and them. In exchange, I guarantee nothing will happen to you." I felt my blood turn to ice water. "And if I refuse?" There was a brief, calculated pause. "Then I cannot guarantee anyone's safety, not yours, not Marcus's, not even the children's. There are exceedingly powerful people involved in this, Doris. People who don't tolerate interference." I struggled to keep my voice steady. "How do I know you won't kill us the moment I surrender the children?" Tanisha laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that raised goosebumps on my arms. Do you genuinely believe I want to kill my own children? They're far too valuable for that. Valuable as merchandise, I replied bitterly. Business is business, Doris. I have debts to pay, and this is the only viable solution. Downtown Atlanta Square, tomorrow at noon. Come alone with Isaiah and Ava. The call disconnected abruptly. I stood trembling on the dark porch. The officer in the patrol car must have noticed my silhouette because she briefly flashed her headlights, a silent signal that she remained vigilant. I returned inside and immediately woke Marcus. He listened to my account of the conversation, his face draining of color. I'm calling Detective Henderson immediately, he declared. Detective Henderson arrived at Celeste's house less than an hour later, accompanied by 2 additional undercover officers. We all convened in the kitchen while the children slept upstairs, blissfully unaware of the danger surrounding them. This could actually work in our favor, Detective Henderson said thoughtfully. We can use this meeting to apprehend them. It's far too dangerous, I protested. What if something goes wrong? What if the children are harmed? We won't be bringing the actual children, Detective Henderson explained carefully. We'll construct a trap. You'll proceed to the agreed location, but with disguised federal agents instead of Isaiah and Ava. We'll have tactical teams positioned throughout the entire square. Marcus nervously ran his hands through his hair. What if they realize? What if they detect the substitution? That's precisely why we need to plan this operation with extreme precision, Detective Henderson said. We need to make it sufficiently convincing for them to approach, but we must guarantee your safety above all else. We discussed intricate details until dawn broke. The plan was undeniably risky, but it represented our best opportunity to capture Tanisha and her accomplices. When the sun finally rose, I was utterly exhausted but filled with determination. As Detective Henderson and his colleagues departed to organize the operation, I went to check on Isaiah and Ava, who were beginning to stir. Good morning, Grandma, Isaiah murmured sleepily. Are we going home today? He asked hopefully. I sat on the edge of the bed and gently stroked his hair. Not quite yet, sweetheart. We're staying a few more days with Auntie Celeste. But I want my other toys, Ava complained, clutching her doll tightly. Very soon, my love. Very soon. I promised, praying it was true. Marcus entered the room, forcing a smile for his children's benefit. His eyes met mine over their heads, a look combining determination with barely concealed terror. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Celeste kept the children entertained with games and stories while Marcus and I received final operational instructions from Detective Henderson via telephone. At 11 o'clock in the morning, it was time to prepare for the operation. I dressed as I normally would for an outing with my grandchildren, comfortable jeans, a simple blouse, my hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Detective Henderson had provided me with a minuscule listening device cleverly disguised as a button on my blouse. Before departing, I embraced Isaiah and Ava more tightly than ever before. Grandma needs to take care of some important matters, but I'll return very soon, I promised, fighting back tears. Be good for Daddy and Auntie Celeste. In the unmarked police vehicle heading toward the downtown square, I felt the crushing weight of everything at stake. 2 female officers disguised as Isaiah and Ava sat beside me, dressed identically to how my grandchildren would have been attired. Are you all right, ma'am? The officer driving inquired with concern. Yes, I replied, though my heart was hammering so violently I thought it might burst through my chest. The square was relatively quiet for a weekday. A few mothers with children occupied the playground equipment, elderly individuals rested on benches, people hurried past on their way to work. Undercover FBI agents were strategically positioned throughout, a popcorn vendor, a woman walking a dog, a man apparently absorbed in his newspaper. I settled on a bench in the center of the square, the 2 disguised officers positioned beside me. It was 5 minutes before noon. It's going to be all right, I whispered to myself repeatedly.